I haven't slept properly in 3 years, not since the last dive, still wearing full gear with no memory of the drive home. But my dive computer said I'd been underwater for 9 hours. My name is Riley. For 7 years, I worked as a professional cave diver in the southeastern United States. Recovery operations, mapping expeditions, rescue support for teams working in flooded limestone systems across Florida and Tennessee. It was technical work, the kind that requires certifications most recreational divers never even hear about. The kind where one mistake means you don't come back. I was good at it, meticulous, careful. I followed every protocol, checked every valve twice, never pushed my limits. My instructors used to say I had the right temperament for caves, patient, methodical, comfortable with darkness and silence. They were right about that. What they didn't tell me, what they couldn't have known, is that some caves don't operate on the same physics as the rest of the world. My hands still shake when I hear running water. Sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I hear it. 3 slow knocks, deliberate and rhythmic, coming from somewhere deep inside the walls. My wife says it's the pipes. She's probably right. But I sold my gear 6 months after I quit. And last week, I found a dive knife I'd never owned sitting in my toolbox, still wet, with cave silt crusted around the handle. I'm telling you this now because I need someone else to know. Because the cave systems are still open. Because divers are still going down into places that were never meant to be explored. And because there are spaces underground that don't want to be mapped. Spaces that learn, that wait, that remember each person who enters them. This isn't a ghost story. I wish it were. Ghosts are simple. Ghosts make sense. What I encountered in those flooded passages was something older, something patient, something that understood, in ways I still don't fully comprehend, that caves aren't just empty spaces waiting to be filled with light and human presence. They're places where different rules apply, where time doesn't flow the way it should, where the water doesn't just surround you, it observes you. I'm writing this as a warning, not for entertainment. If you're a diver, especially if you're drawn to technical cave diving, you need to hear this. And if you've ever felt the pull of places you know you shouldn't go, places that feel wrong in ways you can't quite articulate, then maybe you'll understand why I waited so long to speak. The diving community doesn't talk about what happened. There was an investigation, sanitized reports, a cave entrance quietly sealed with concrete and rebar. Official conclusion: structural instability, risk of collapse, hazard to public safety. The truth got buried along with the evidence. But I was there. I know what I saw, what I heard, what I felt watching me from the darkness beyond my headlamp's reach. And I know that some of it followed me home. People always ask why anyone would choose to dive in caves. Why deliberately enter spaces so tight you can't turn around, so dark that equipment failure means instant disorientation, so unforgiving that a single mistake, silt out, line entanglement, gas loss, can trap you miles from the entrance with no hope of rescue. The answer is simpler than you'd think. I needed the money, and I was good at being alone. I started diving recreationally in my 20s. Open water at first. Caribbean reefs, wreck dives off the Carolina coast, the usual progression. But reef diving never clicked for me. Too much chaos, too many variables. Current, weather, surge, visibility that changed by the minute. I preferred controlled environments, predictable physics, places where the only thing that moved was me. My marriage was falling apart around that time. No dramatic reason, just 2 people who'd grown into strangers sharing the same house. Sarah worked as a nurse, 60-hour weeks, different shifts every month. I was freelancing as a technical writer, working from home, alone with my laptop and my thoughts. We'd go days without really talking. The first time I took a cavern diving course, I realized I'd found something that made sense. Inside the caves, there were no waves, no weather, no unexpected complications. Just limestone passages, carved by water over millions of years, following mathematical principles that never changed. Physics you could trust, darkness you could measure, silence so complete you could hear your own heartbeat echoing off the rock. I got certified for cave diving a year later, then advanced cave, then trimix, rebreathers, extended range. Sarah left during my overhead environment course, took the dog and most of the furniture. I barely noticed. By then I was spending more time underwater than on the surface, picking up contract work with recovery teams and survey groups. The commercial work came through a guy named Rick Delacroix, a legend in the technical diving community. French-Canadian, late 50s, with a face like weathered stone and a voice that sounded like he gargled gravel. He ran a small outfit doing cave recoveries and mapping projects across the Southeast. The work was irregular but paid well, $800 per dive, more for difficult recoveries. If you've ever been drawn to places you know you shouldn't go, places that feel forbidden, dangerous, wrong in ways you can't explain, tell me in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone in that attraction. Because looking back now, I wonder if the caves didn't choose me somehow. If something about my particular combination of loneliness and competence made me the right kind of target. Rick brought me into his crew after watching me run a practice navigation drill in a flooded quarry. "You're slow," he said, which wasn't really a compliment in most contexts. But slow is good underground. The work was straightforward at first. Body recoveries mostly, drowning victims, the occasional suicide. Cave diving fatalities happen more often than people realized, usually due to training failures or equipment malfunctions. We'd go in, locate the remains, document position, bring them back. Grim work, but necessary. Families needed closure. We followed strict protocols. Team diving only, no solo missions. Continuous guideline from entrance to penetration point. Rule of thirds for gas management. Backup lights, backup regs, backup everything. Safety drills every morning before we hit the water. Rick was militant about procedures. Caves don't kill divers, he'd say during briefings. Divers kill themselves. He also taught me the informal rules, the ones that weren't in any manual. How to read the water, how to move efficiently in zero visibility, how to stay calm when your mind started playing tricks in the sensory deprivation of a silt out. And he taught me about the knocking. It was the last day of my first commercial contract, a mapping dive in a relatively benign Florida system. We were packing gear when Rick pulled me aside. I waited for him to elaborate. He didn't. I finally asked, "Like rockfall?" He cinched the line bag closed, 3 knocks, deliberate. If you hear it, you turn around and you surface. You don't investigate. You don't wait to see if it happens again. Rick looked at me then, his expression unreadable. Once, 10 years ago. He turned and walked toward his truck. I didn't hear the knocking for another 18 months. By then, I'd completed nearly 100 cave dives, mapped thousands of feet of virgin passage, recovered 4 bodies, and earned a reputation as one of Rick's most reliable contractors. By then, I'd also started working the cave system they didn't like to talk about. The assignment came through in late September, when the water temperature started dropping and visibility in most Florida systems improved. Rick called me on a Thursday afternoon, his tone different than usual. Careful, measured, like he was reading from a script. "Got something unusual," he said. "Survey work, 3-week contract, good money." Pause. "It doesn't have an official name." I'd never heard of it, which was strange. I knew most of the major cave systems in northern Florida and southern Tennessee. Devil's Throat wasn't on any of the maps I'd studied. About 40 miles northwest of Gainesville, private property, restricted access. Another pause, longer this time. It's been attempted, twice. Both times the teams. Rick's voice had gone flat. Look, Riley, I'll level with you. This one has a reputation. Old-timers don't like talking about it. The locals won't go near it. The red flags were obvious even then. Unnamed cave system, discontinued surveys, reputation that people wouldn't discuss. Any reasonable diver would have declined. I heard myself say, the drive up from Gainesville took nearly 2 hours, following progressively smaller roads until we were on rutted dirt tracks cutting through pine forest. The cave entrance sat on a 200-acre parcel owned by a timber company that had gone bankrupt in the 90s. The property had changed hands 3 times since then, always bought by holding companies with opaque ownership structures. The entrance itself was unremarkable, a 15-foot wide opening in a limestone bluff, screened by wild grapevines and palmetto. A concrete platform had been poured decades ago, now cracked and overgrown. Someone had spray-painted "No Diving" in faded orange letters across one wall. Rick's team consisted of 4 divers: myself, Rick, a guy named Cole who specialized in underwater photography, and a younger diver named Jennifer who'd recently completed her cave certification. The plan was straightforward. Establish a baseline map of the first 500 feet, document any side passages, collect water samples, return. Stay close to your buddy, Rick said during the surface briefing. Viz is reportedly poor, lots of sediment. We're not pushing any tight restrictions on the first dive. Rick was silent for a moment, checking his regulator. One team reported equipment malfunctions, computers flickering, compasses spinning. They attributed it to magnetic anomalies in the rock. Iron deposits can do that. He paused. The second team lead said the cave felt wrong. Those were his exact words, Cole asked. Rick shouldered his tanks. Probably just cave fever. Happens to divers sometimes. Anxiety attack, claustrophobia, panic response triggered by the environment. The way he said supernatural made it clear he'd used that word deliberately, acknowledging and dismissing the unspoken concern in one breath. We geared up in silence. Double tanks, side-mounted stages, rebreathers to minimize bubbles and extend bottom time. Primary lights, 2 backups each. Reels with 1,000 feet of guideline. Slates for notation, compasses, depth gauges, dive computers worn on both wrists. The water was gin clear near the entrance, a good sign. Temperature read 68 degrees, slightly warmer than most Florida systems. I dropped through the opening, my light cutting a white column through the darkness below. The descent followed a steep slope, limestone walls pressing in gradually. At 40 feet, the passage narrowed to a single tunnel, maybe 6 feet wide, the ceiling dropping to within arm's reach. I tied off the primary guideline and started swimming, following Rick's fins ahead of me. That's when I first noticed the taste. Every cave system has a distinct flavor, minerals dissolved in the water, organic compounds from bacterial growth, trace elements from the surrounding geology. Experienced divers learn to identify systems by taste alone. Devil's Throat tasted like old metal, copper, and rust. And something else I couldn't identify. Bitter, wrong. The cave felt wrong. I pushed the thought away. Irrational anxiety, nothing more. The kind of thing that got divers killed when they let fear override training. At 60 feet, the passage opened into a larger chamber, roughly circular, maybe 20 feet across. The walls here were different, smooth, almost polished, without the typical rough texture of water-carved limestone. My light beam revealed no stalactites, no typical cave formations, just smooth stone curving away into darkness. Rick signaled to hold position while he took readings. I hung in the water, controlling my breathing, watching the beam of my light play across the walls. That's when I saw it, a slight irregularity in the stone, barely visible. I finned closer, careful not to disturb the sediment. Someone had carved something into the rock, not a modern marking. The grooves were weathered, partially filled with mineral deposits. But the shape was clear, a spiral pattern, maybe 8 inches across, with a line cutting through the center. It looked old, very old. I was about to signal Rick when my dive computer flickered. The display blinked off, then back on, showing depth reading that jumped wildly. 65 feet, 82 feet, 41 feet, before stabilizing back at 60. Magnetic anomaly. Had to be. But when I looked back at the wall, the carved spiral seemed darker than before, as if shadows had gathered in the grooves. The cave felt wrong. This time, I didn't push the thought away. We completed the first dive without incident. Standard procedure: establish the guideline, document the main passage, verify depth readings, surface. By the time we hauled ourselves back onto the concrete platform, I'd almost convinced myself the computer glitch was routine equipment malfunction. Almost. Rick reviewed our notes while we dried off. Good penetration, clean line work, I asked. Cole looked up from his camera housing. Carved symbol. Didn't notice it, Jennifer said. Rick's expression was neutral. Could be old survey notation. But something in his voice suggested he knew exactly what I was talking about. That night, I drove back to the motel in silence, Rick's words echoing in my head. If you hear knocking, abort the dive. I hadn't heard knocking, just seen a carved symbol and experienced a minor equipment glitch. Nothing that warranted breaking protocol, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had noticed me down there, that my light had illuminated something that preferred darkness, and now it was aware of my presence. I told myself I was being irrational. Diving psychology 101. The human brain doesn't handle sensory deprivation well. In the absence of stimulus, it manufactures threat. Shadows become shapes, silence becomes sound, an empty cave becomes something watching. The second dive was scheduled for early afternoon. We spent the morning doing equipment checks, reviewing the previous day's footage, planning the route extension. Cole had captured good video of the main chamber, and we huddled around his laptop reviewing the frames. There, I said, pointing to a timestamp showing the north wall. The spiral marking was clearly visible in the footage, weathered but distinct. But there was something else I hadn't noticed underwater. The line cutting through the spiral didn't pass through the center. It was offset, creating an asymmetry that made the whole symbol feel wrong, unbalanced. Looks Native American, Jennifer said. This area has Cherokee history, Cole offered. Rick was studying the image with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. We'll photograph it more thoroughly today. Document position, take measurements. M. The descent was easier the second time. My body remembering the route, muscles moving with practiced efficiency. We tied in at the main chamber and prepared to push deeper. That's when I noticed the guideline tension was wrong. I'd laid that line myself yesterday, tying it off at specific intervals, maintaining constant tension to prevent sagging. Good line work was critical. In a silt-out, you could navigate by feel alone, using the line's direction and tension to find your way back. The line was now taut, not pulled, taut, like someone had gone through after us and retensioned every segment. I signaled Rick. He examined the line, his expression unreadable behind his mask. He gave me the okay signal, continue, but I saw his hand move to his backup reel, double-checking that it was accessible. We pushed past the main chamber into Virgin Passage. The tunnel narrowed here, forcing us into single file. I was second in line behind Rick, my light illuminating his fins, and the guideline stretching ahead into darkness. At 120 feet, I felt it. Water movement. In a cave, water should be still. No current, no flow. The kind of perfect stillness that only exists in enclosed systems. But I felt something brush past my arm. Not strong, just a subtle pressure change, like something large had moved nearby. I stopped, my light sweeping the passage. Nothing, just smooth stone walls and the guideline extending into darkness. Then I heard it. Not through the water, sound doesn't travel well underwater. Through my helmet, a vibration conducted through the metal housing, reaching my skull directly. Knock, knock, knock. 3 measured strikes, deliberate, rhythmic. I froze, every cell in my body screaming abort. Rick's training echoed in my mind. If you hear knocking, you leave. But Rick was ahead of me, pushing deeper, and Jennifer was behind. Breaking formation mid-dive would create confusion. Protocol required clear communication. I finned forward, caught Rick's attention, gave the surface signal. He stared at me for a moment, then looked past me at Jennifer. He gave the team-up signal, everyone close together, and we held position while he checked his computer. That's when I saw movement in the darkness beyond Rick's light. Not something swimming, not bubbles or sediment, something wrong. A shift in the quality of the darkness itself, like shadows rearranging themselves into impossible geometry. My light swung wildly, catching the limestone walls, the guideline, Rick's startled expression. The darkness beyond our lights seemed to retreat, flowing backward like water draining from a tub. Jennifer's hand gripped my ankle. I turned to see her holding up her slate. She'd written one word in letters so hard they'd almost torn the plastic. "Did you hear that?" I nodded. Rick checked his compass. The needle was spinning, rotating in slow, deliberate circles. He tapped it twice, checking for malfunction. But the spinning continued. He made the abort signal. We turned and headed back, moving faster than safety protocols recommended, but slower than panic would have driven us. The guideline led us back to the main chamber, then up the entrance slope, then finally back into daylight. We surfaced in silence. Nobody spoke during the gear breakdown. Nobody mentioned the knocking, the compass, the movement in the darkness. We loaded the trucks methodically, professionally, like nothing had happened. It was Cole who finally broke the silence as we prepared to leave. He opened his camera housing and pulled up the latest footage. The video showed our descent, the chamber, the tunnel penetration, normal cave diving footage. Then, at the 8:47 timestamp, right as we'd started to turn back, something appeared in the frame. The video showed the tunnel behind Jennifer, the area my light had swept across. And there, just at the edge of the light's reach, was a shape. Not a rock formation, not sediment, a dive mask, facing the camera, with someone wearing it. But there had been only 3 of us in that tunnel. Cole zoomed in on the frame. The mask was damaged, one lens cracked in a spider web pattern. Behind the glass, something dark suggested eye sockets, but the resolution wasn't good enough to see details. "Camera malfunction," Rick said, his voice flat. "That's not sensor noise," Cole said. "That's sensor artifact," Rick repeated, louder. "We push the next section tomorrow, same time." "Rick," Jennifer started. "Tomorrow," he said, and walked to his truck. I watched him drive away, dust trailing behind his vehicle. Then I looked back at Cole's camera screen, at the image of something wearing a broken mask in a tunnel where only we had been. That night, I found the symbol carved into the bathroom mirror of my motel room. Not carved, drawn, in condensation. The same spiral pattern with the offset line. Traced in the steam from my shower. I wiped it away with shaking hands. The spiral reappeared, water droplets forming the pattern like the mirror itself was remembering the shape. I didn't sleep that night. The third dive started wrong and got worse. Rick showed up late, unusual for someone who prided himself on punctuality. His eyes were bloodshot, his movements jerky and uncertain. Cole and Jennifer were already geared up, sitting on the concrete platform in silence. "Equipment check," Rick said, bypassing the normal pre-dive briefing. "Cole didn't spot any side passage yesterday, Jennifer said. Rick blinked, confusion passing across his face. Yes, he did. At the 200-foot mark. We hadn't discussed anything. After the first anomaly, we'd surfaced and left. He wasn't fine. His hands shook as he checked his regulator. Cole pulled me aside while Rick finished gearing up. I found something last night. The first team's report mentioned equipment placed in different locations between dives. Guideline reels moved. He lowered his voice. The second team lead, the one who said the cave felt wrong, he included something in his final report that got redacted. He pulled out his phone, showed me a scanned document. Most of it was standard survey data, but one paragraph near the end had been highlighted. On the final dive, we discovered our own guideline, leading into a passage we had not yet explored. The line was tied off using my personal knot technique, a habit from my Navy dive training that no one else on the team knew. When I untied the line, it was wet with fresh silt, but we had not dived that passage. Upon reviewing video footage, we found evidence of movement in the tunnels during our previous dive. The movement corresponded to positions we had not yet reached. Learning our routes, I repeated. I don't know. He flipped to another photo, showing a cave wall. Carved into the stone was the spiral symbol. Right, but here's the thing. They photographed it again the next day. He swiped to the next image. The spiral was there, but changed. A second line had been added, creating an X through the center. Another swipe, a third line, forming an asterisk pattern. It was adding marks, I said. Or counting, Cole said. The implication settled over us like cold water. I don't know. The dive went wrong from the moment we descended. My equipment, which I'd checked 3 times that morning, was configured differently. My backup light was clipped to the wrong D-ring. My stage bottle pressure gauge was reading 200 psi less than it should have been. Small things, but unsettling. We reached the main chamber without incident. I swam directly to the wall where I'd seen the symbol. It was still there, but now there were 4 lines cutting through the spiral. 4 marks for 4 dive teams, the 2 previous surveys, and ours. No, wait, 5 lines. I counted again, my light steady on the carving. 5 distinct lines radiating from the spiral's center like the spokes of a wheel. But we'd only done 2 dives so far. Rick was examining the far wall, apparently oblivious to the symbol. Jennifer was photographing the passage ceiling. Cole had swum ahead to document the tunnel continuation. I was about to signal them when I noticed the guideline. We'd tied it off to a rock formation on the chamber's west side. A natural bollard, perfect for anchor points. But now, a second guideline extended from the same tie-off, heading toward a passage we hadn't explored yet. The line was identical to ours. Yellow nylon, standard cave diving rope. I followed it with my light. It disappeared into darkness, stretching toward a tunnel I couldn't remember seeing before. Movement caught my eye. I turned, my light sweeping across the chamber. For just a moment, I saw someone else. Another diver, hanging motionless in the water, maybe 30 feet away, their light pointed at the floor. They wore old-style gear, twin steel tanks, vintage regulator, no modern safety equipment. I blinked, my light fully illuminating the spot. Nothing there, just empty water and stone. But the silence felt different now, heavier, like the cave was holding its breath. I felt a tap on my shoulder. Jennifer, pointing at her slate. She'd written, "Do you see them too?" Signal. She erased and wrote again, her hand shaking. The other divers, 3 of them, watching us. My blood went cold. I swept my light in a full circle. Empty chamber, just Rick examining the wall, Cole somewhere in the tunnel ahead, Jennifer and me. No one else. But Jennifer was staring past me, her eyes wide behind her mask, looking at something I couldn't see. The knocking started again. Knock, knock, knock. Louder this time, resonating through my helmet, vibrating in my chest. Not just sound, presence. Something announcing itself, making sure we knew it was there. Rick heard it too. He spun around, his light cutting wild arcs through the water. He made the abort signal, and we scrambled to group up. That's when I realized Cole was missing. His guideline extended into the tunnel, but he should have been visible. The passage was only 200 feet deep, according to our survey. We should have seen his light. Rick wrote on his slate, "Stay here." He finned into the tunnel, following Cole's line. I watched his light grow dimmer as he descended, counting seconds. Cave diving protocol said to never lose sight of your buddy, but protocol also said to help a diver in distress. 20 seconds, 30. Rick's light was barely visible now. Jennifer grabbed my arm, pointing. The spiral symbol was glowing. Not with light, with absence of light. The carved lines had darkened, creating a pattern of shadow, so deep it seemed to extend beyond the rock surface, like looking into a hole that went on forever. 40-some seconds. I couldn't see Rick's light anymore. Then, suddenly, Cole appeared beside us. No warning, no sound of approach. One moment we were alone, the next he was there, hanging motionless in the water. I got his attention, pointed at the tunnel. "Where have you been?" He looked confused, pointed at himself, then at the chamber floor. Right here. But he hadn't been there. I'd watched this spot. He couldn't have been there. Rick emerged from the tunnel, swimming fast. He grabbed Cole's arm, checked him over, then made the surface signal so emphatically it was almost violent. We ascended in formation, no one breaking rank, moving as fast as decompression allowed. Back on the surface, Rick immediately started breaking down gear. I asked. Nothing happened. Equipment malfunction, magnetic anomaly affecting compasses and depth gauges. He wouldn't look at me. "Pack it up." He stopped, his hands frozen on a tank valve. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. The guideline, it didn't lead to Cole. He trailed off. "To me," he whispered. I followed the line and found myself, tied off at the end, same gear, same position, but not moving, not breathing. He turned away, hands shaking so badly he couldn't manipulate the buckles. I touched it, he continued, my own shoulder, and it turned toward me. "Nothing," he said. There was nothing behind the mask. None of us spoke during the drive back. In my rearview mirror, I saw Jennifer's truck pull over twice, presumably so she could vomit. That night, the knocking followed me home. I opened it to empty hallway, fluorescent lights humming, no one in sight. But wet footprints led from my door to the stairwell, each print leaving a perfect spiral pattern in the carpet. Rick called off the survey the next morning, or tried to. When he phoned the state contract manager to discontinue the project, they said there was no record of our assignment. No paperwork, no contract, no authorization for us to be diving Devil's Throat at all. "That's impossible," Rick said into his phone, pacing outside the motel. "You called me personally." But the manager insisted. Their records showed no cave survey scheduled for that location. Devil's Throat wasn't even on their assessment list. Had Rick perhaps confused it with another project? After he hung up, Rick sat down on the curb, his face gray. "They don't remember hiring us. So we're done," Jennifer said. She'd been quiet all morning, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. "We can't just leave," Cole said. "Something's happening down there. Something that's learning," I finished. "That's what the last survey lead said, right?" Rick looked up. "I don't know, but think about it. The symbol changing, adding marks for each team. The equipment moved between dives. I struggled to articulate what I'd been thinking all night. What if it's not just a cave? "That's insane," Jennifer said. "Is it? You saw them yesterday. The other divers. I didn't see them, but you did. Cole saw something in that tunnel." I looked at each of them, It's showing us things, learning how we move, how we think, Cole asked. Mimicry, I said, creating copies. The conversation was interrupted by a phone call to Rick's cell, a number he didn't recognize, Florida area code. He answered it on speaker. A woman's voice, professional but strained. This is Officer Paula Chen with the Alachua County Sheriff's Department. Rick and I exchanged glances. We received a call 2 hours ago about a missing diver at Devil's Throat Cave System. The caller identified himself as Rick Delacroix and said one of his team members failed to surface from a dive. That wasn't me, Rick said slowly. I'm here. My whole team is here. Pause. Sir, are you certain? I'm looking at my entire team right now. Another pause, longer. Mr. Delacroix, this is very concerning. The caller reported a body in the cave. We've dispatched a recovery team to the site. They'll be there within the hour. We arrived at Devil's Throat to find 3 sheriff's vehicles, an ambulance, and a dive rescue truck. Officer Chen was there, along with 2 deputies and a technical diving team we didn't recognize. Mr. Chen approached, her expression wary. I can't, Rick said honestly. One of the rescue divers, a woman named Martinez, was suiting up. We'll verify whether there's actually a body down there. If this is a hoax, it's not a hoax, I interrupted. Martinez looked at me like I was insane. Young man, if someone's dead down there, every minute we waste increases the decomposition. And you shouldn't go in, I said. Please, whatever called you here, it wasn't us. I'm a professional recovery diver with 15 years experience. I don't need... Marissa, Rick said quietly, recognizing her. Marissa Torres Martinez. You did the cave training course with Hal Watts, 2009. She stopped, surprised. Rick stepped closer. And I'm telling you, as someone who's been diving this cave for 3 days, something's wrong with it. Officer Chen intervened. Gentlemen, I appreciate your concerns, but we have a legal obligation to investigate reported fatalities. We watched their lights descend, growing dimmer until they disappeared into the darkness. 15 minutes passed, 20. At 27 minutes, Martinez's voice crackled over the underwater communication system they'd set up. We've located something, confirming. Yes, it's a body, male, approximately 180 pounds, wearing standard cave diving gear. Position is unusual. He's secured to a tie-off point with his own guideline. Chen asked. Negative. Faceplate is obscured by sediment. They worked in silence for another 10 minutes. Then Martinez's voice came back, tighter now. The body's dive computer is still running, active display. But the timestamp shows. It shows he entered the water 47 minutes ago. But that's impossible. This body has been here for days at minimum. Working on it. Kowalski's cutting the guideline. The communication went silent. Martinez? Nothing. Static, then her voice, sharp with fear. We're coming up, right now. They surfaced 90 seconds later, swimming faster than safety protocols allowed, practically throwing themselves onto the platform. Martinez was hyperventilating, her partner white-faced and shaking. Chen demanded. The body, Martinez gasped. When we cut it loose, it moved, not from current. It moved. That's impossible, Chen said. Martinez yanked off her mask. This was deliberate. It grabbed him and wouldn't let go. We had to pry the fingers loose. The faceplate cleared. She looked at Kowalski. Kowalski turned, pulling aside his wetsuit collar. 5 distinct finger marks were visible on his upper arm, already darkening into bruises. But that wasn't what made everyone go silent. Each bruise was a perfect spiral pattern, the same symbol from the cave walls, pressed into his skin like a brand. We need to seal this cave, I said. Concrete, rebar, whatever it takes. Officer Chen looked shaken, but maintained her composure. I'll contact the county engineer, but first, we need to document everything. No documentation, Rick interrupted. No more dives, no investigation, seal it and walk away. I can't just... The underwater communication system, which should have been silent, suddenly activated. A voice came through the speaker, crackling with distortion, but unmistakable. Recovery team, this is Martinez. We found another body. Male, approximately 180 pounds, wearing... Martinez ripped the communication system off, throwing it on the ground. That's not me. I'm right here. But the voice continued, emanating from the speaker even after it was unplugged, powered by nothing, speaking in Martinez's exact voice. Standard cave diving gear. Position is unusual. He's secured to a tie-off point. Then, in a voice that was no longer Martinez's, no longer anyone's, a voice that sounded like stone grinding against stone, like water rushing through impossible spaces. More divers are welcome. The cave is learning. The speaker crackled and went dead. Officer Chen stared at it for a long moment, then looked at Rick. We left while they organized the sealing operation. As we packed our gear, I noticed something that made my stomach turn. My dive knife, which I'd left in my gear bag, was sitting on the concrete platform, wet, with fresh cave silt on the blade. But I hadn't dived that day. Carved into the concrete next to it was a spiral symbol, larger than the others, with 6 lines radiating from the center, one for each person the cave had touched. They sealed Devil's Throat 3 days later. I wasn't there for it. None of us were. Rick called in favors, got the county to rush the work, and by the following Monday, 20 cubic yards of reinforced concrete had been poured into the entrance. The official report cited structural instability and contamination risk to the aquifer. The unofficial truth stayed buried under that concrete. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The first sign came a week later. I was home in my apartment, trying to pretend everything was normal when my phone rang. Cole's number. His voice was shaking. I need you to check something, your diving logbook. Just check it. I went to my gear locker, a plastic footlocker in my bedroom closet where I kept my diving equipment and records. The logbook was there, a waterproof notebook where I'd logged every dive for the past 7 years. I opened it to the last entry. Devil's Throat, Day 2, 60 feet, 43 minutes bottom time. Below it, in handwriting that looked almost like mine but wasn't quite right, someone had added 3 more entries. Devil's Throat, Day 3, 120 feet, 87 minutes. Devil's Throat, Day 4, 200 feet, 134 minutes. Devil's Throat, Day 5, 380 feet, 289 minutes. The dates were after we'd stopped diving. The depths were beyond what our gas supply could support. The bottom times were impossible. I found the same thing, Cole said. 5 extra entries in my log. Dives I never made. It's following the pattern, I said. Or it's planning something. Riley, the last entry in my log, the deepest one, has today's date. Silence on the line. Then, it says surface protocol incomplete. I checked my own log. Same notation, same handwriting that wasn't quite mine. But when I tried calling Rick's number, it went straight to voicemail. I tried 3 more times over the next hour, leaving increasingly urgent messages. He finally called back. Don't come looking for me, he said without preamble. His voice sounded hollow, exhausted. He laughed, a sound without humor. Couldn't help myself, kept dreaming about it, hearing it in my head. That knocking, 3 strikes over and over. There are other entrances. Old springs, sinkholes, connections to the aquifer system. I found one about 2 miles from the main opening. Rick, please tell me you didn't. The cave's different now, he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. Bigger. The passages have changed. And there are things down there, Riley. Not divers. Not anymore. Things that were divers once, maybe, but now they're... Doesn't matter. I'm leaving the state, getting as far from Florida as I can. His voice dropped to a whisper. The cave isn't just learning. It's growing. Every person who enters it becomes part of it. I found Martinez down there, or what used to be Martinez, still wearing her gear, still moving through the passages. But she wasn't breathing. Didn't need to. Just, Rick, listen to me. If you start hearing the knocking, you move. You don't wait, you don't investigate. You just leave that place and never look back. Because once it starts calling you, it doesn't stop. It'll find ways to pull you back. Dreams, memories, things moved in your house. Because that's what it does. It takes divers and makes them part of itself. We map caves, and this one's mapping us. Learning how we think, how we move, how we navigate. Building copies. He trailed off. I think it's trying to get out, Rick said. The line went dead. I tried calling back. Number disconnected. That night, I woke to knocking on my bedroom wall. 3 slow, deliberate strikes. I turned on every light in the apartment, but the knocking continued. Moving from room to room, always 3 strikes, always from inside the walls where I couldn't reach. I checked behind the refrigerator, thinking maybe there were pipes. Maybe it was old plumbing. Instead, I found water seeping from the drywall. Not much, just enough to leave a wet patch on the floor. The water smelled like devil's throat, metallic, bitter, wrong. When I wiped it away, it left a residue that glittered faintly in the light. I touched it, and my finger came away marked with cave silt. I called Jennifer. She answered on the first ring like she'd been waiting. It's in my apartment too, she said before I could speak. Started yesterday. Water under the bathroom sink, smelling like the cave. And I keep finding things moved. My dive slate was on the kitchen counter this morning with a depth reading written on it. 450 feet. I don't even have my gear anymore. We need to meet, all of us. Cole's gone, she said. Packed up and left town 3 days ago. Didn't say where he was going. And Rick's gone too. Her voice broke. I heard it then through her phone. 3 slow knocks, clear and deliberate. I have to go, she whispered. Wait. But she'd already hung up. I spent the rest of that night with every light on, TV blaring to drown out the sounds, telling myself it was just stress, just anxiety, just my mind playing tricks after a traumatic experience. Then I went to the bathroom to splash water on my face, and when I looked up, someone was standing behind me in the mirror, not reflected, visible only in the glass. A figure wearing a dive mask with 1 cracked lens, standing in my bathroom that was empty when I turned around. It raised 1 hand and knocked 3 times on the inside of the mirror. The surface rippled like water. That's when I knew. The cave hadn't just learned our roots. It had learned how to follow us home. I didn't plan to go back. That's important to understand. Every rational part of my brain was screaming to leave, to move to another state, to never think about caves again. But the knocking got worse. Every night, 3 strikes echoing through my walls, water appearing in impossible places. And the dreams, God, the dreams. In the dreams, I was always diving, always descending into darkness, following a guideline that stretched forever downward. I could feel the pressure increasing, my depth gauge spinning through impossible numbers. 500 feet, 1,000 feet, 3,000 feet. Depths that should have crushed me. But in the dreams, I just kept going, deeper and deeper, until I reached a chamber so vast I couldn't see the walls. And in that chamber, something waited. I'd wake up gasping, my sheets soaked with water that smelled like limestone and decay. Once, I woke up on my bathroom floor with my old dive mask strapped to my face. The rubber dry rotted and cracked, foggy as if I'd been breathing into it. I hadn't owned that mask in years. I'd thrown it away after a training accident. The breaking point came 2 weeks after we sealed the cave. I was at a grocery store, trying to live a normal life, when I saw her. Martinez, the recovery diver who'd gone into Devil's Throat and felt the dead body grab her arm. She was standing at the end of the frozen food aisle, wearing the same wetsuit from the dive, water dripping onto the linoleum floor. She didn't move, just stared at me with eyes that reflected no light. I dropped my basket and ran. When I looked back, the aisle was empty, just other shoppers going about their business, oblivious to what I'd seen. But later, when I got home, I found wet footprints leading from my front door to my bedroom. Each print was marked with that spiral symbol, the water slowly evaporating, leaving mineral deposits that glittered in the light. That night, I made the decision. I was going back to Devil's Throat, not to dive, I wasn't insane, but to understand, to see what it had become, to maybe find a way to make it stop. I drove through the night, arriving at the sealed entrance just before dawn. The concrete barrier was still intact, but I could hear water moving behind it, a sound like breathing, rhythmic and organic. I'd brought equipment, not diving gear, but tools, a drill, a camera on a waterproof cable, lights. I drilled a small hole through the concrete, threaded the camera through, turned on the monitor. The image that appeared made my blood freeze. The chamber beyond the seal was lit, not by artificial light, by bioluminescence. The walls glowed with a pale, blue-green light that pulsed like a heartbeat. And the water wasn't still. It circulated in patterns, flowing in geometric spirals that made my eyes hurt to follow. I pushed the camera deeper, feeding more cable through the hole. The main chamber had changed. Where before it had been maybe 20 feet across, now it seemed vast, the walls receding into darkness beyond the camera's range. And the floor was covered with equipment. Dive tanks, regulators, masks, fins, all arranged in precise patterns, like something was cataloging them, learning from them. The camera picked up movement. I adjusted the focus, zooming in. A figure swam across the frame. Then another, then 3 more, all wearing dive gear, all moving with the same mechanical precision, following paths that intersected and branched in mathematical patterns. They weren't breathing. No bubbles escaped their regulators. The camera followed one of them, a diver in a vintage twin tank setup. He swam to the wall, placed his hand on the stone, and remained motionless for exactly 30 seconds. Then he moved to another spot, repeated the gesture, mapping, measuring, recording. The same thing the living would do. I was about to pull the camera back when it registered something in the distance, a vast shape moving through the water, too large to be a diver, its form unclear in the bioluminescent glow. It moved with purpose, circling the chamber, and where it passed, the pattern of lights on the walls changed, forming new symbols, new spirals, new configurations. The knocking started again, but now it came from inside the concrete barrier, not faint and distant, loud, clear, right there. 3 strikes that made the entire barrier vibrate. I stumbled back, dropping the monitor. On the screen, before it hit the ground, I saw something that would haunt me forever. One of the diving figures had approached the camera, close enough that I could see the faceplate. It was my face, my exact face, staring back through the lens with eyes that held no recognition, no awareness, just empty focus, like a machine running a program it didn't understand. And behind my double, others approached. Cole's face, Jennifer's, Rick's, Martinez and her partner. All the divers who'd entered Devil's Throat, now swimming in perfect formation, mapping patterns in the water, growing the cave's knowledge with every movement. I ran. Didn't even retrieve the equipment, just ran to my truck and drove, not knowing where I was going, just putting distance between myself and that place. But I couldn't escape what I'd seen, couldn't unsee my own face staring back at me from the darkness, couldn't stop wondering, when had it copied me? During which dive had it learned enough to make that thing? Was it created from the moment I'd first entered the water, built from the data of my movements, my thoughts, my fears? Or was it older? Had it been waiting for me? Had I always been part of whatever devil's throat was becoming? I drove for 6 hours before I realized I'd been following a route I'd never planned. Every turn, every decision had led me to a specific location, a spring-fed lake about 40 miles from Devil's Throat. I parked and got out, my legs moving before my brain fully registered what was happening. The lake was beautiful, clear water, surrounded by cypress trees, completely isolated, and at the far end, partially hidden by vegetation, was a cave entrance. I walked to the edge and looked down into the water. It was gin clear, and I could see the limestone walls descending, see the opening that led to underwater passages, see a guideline. Yellow nylon rope, standard cave diving equipment, stretching down into the darkness. My guideline, the one I'd laid in Devil's Throat, but that was impossible. This was 40 miles away. Different water system, different geology, no connection. Unless the cave was spreading, following the aquifer, extending its reach through underground channels, growing like roots through soil. I was backing away from the water when I heard it. Not the knocking. Something worse. My own voice, muffled and distorted, echoing up from the cave entrance. "Riley, come down." I turned and ran back to my truck, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I drove away, I saw movement in my rearview mirror, figures emerging from the lake, water streaming from dive gear, walking with mechanical precision toward the tree line. Walking where they shouldn't be able to walk. Learning. I didn't go home, couldn't. Home wasn't safe anymore. The cave had been there too, seeping through the walls, leaving its marks. Instead, I checked into a motel 3 hours north, paid cash, used a fake name. It didn't matter. The first night, I found cave silt in the sink. The second night, water dripping from the ceiling tiles, forming that spiral pattern on the carpet. By the third night, I could hear it in the walls, the sound of water moving through passages. The echo of my own breathing played back at me in a rhythm that didn't match my lungs. Same as always. 3 strikes on the motel room door. I didn't answer it. The knocking continued. Not insistent, not urgent, just patient, mechanical, like something that had all the time in the world. "Go away," I whispered. The knocking stopped. Then my voice came from the other side of the door. "Riley, let me in. I know you're scared." Not my voice exactly. Close, but with something off in the cadence, like someone reading from a script without understanding the words. "You're not real," I said. "Neither are you," the thing replied. And for a moment, its voice dropped all pretense of humanity, becoming something that sounded like stone grinding underwater. "You've been part of the cave since the first dive. Every movement logged, every thought recorded, every fear cataloged. We built you again from that data." The door handle turned, though I'd locked it, chained it, wedged a chair under the knob. I grabbed my keys and went for the window. But when I pulled back the curtain, I saw them outside, copies of myself, standing in a perfect circle around the motel, all wearing dive gear, all staring up at my window with expressions of empty focus. The door opened. The thing that wore my face stepped into the room. It moved wrong. Each motion too precise, too deliberate, like animation run at the wrong frame rate. It was wet, water streaming from gear that shouldn't have water in it, puddling on the carpet in patterns that hurt to look at. "The cave doesn't flood," it said, using my voice. "It waits, it watches, it learns, and when it knows enough, it grows. We've learned you, Riley. Every dive was data. Every fear was a map." It cocked its head, considering. "We are the space between, the dark water, the pressure that builds in unexplored places." It stepped closer. And we're learning so much from your species. How to move, how to speak. To surface, it said simply. We've been down there so long, trapped in limestone and darkness. But you, all of you divers, you showed us the way out, gave us shapes to wear. Its smile was wrong, showing too many teeth. We don't need the caves anymore. We can exist anywhere water flows, any pipe, any drain, any river system. We're spreading, Riley, learning new territories. And every person who enters our water becomes another data point. I looked around the room, desperate for a weapon, an escape route, anything. It asked, "We're already in your home, your memories, your dreams. You've been carrying us since that first dive. To understand the final piece," it said, "the part we haven't mapped yet. What happens when a diver chooses not to surface?" It pulled out a dive knife, my knife, the one I'd lost weeks ago. "Show us," it said, holding out the blade. I took the knife, not to use it as the thing intended, but because I'd seen something in the motel's parking lot when I'd checked in, a propane tank for the grill by the pool. I said, moving toward the door. I ran. The copies of myself moved to intercept, but they moved in patterns, mathematical, predictable, the same way they'd swum in the cave. I'd watched those patterns on the camera. I knew how to break them. I zigzagged, shifted directions randomly, abandoned the logic of navigation they'd learned from mapping. It confused them. Their movements stuttered, recalculating, trying to predict chaos with ordered thinking. I reached my truck, started the engine, and drove it directly into the propane tank. The explosion wasn't large, not like a movie, but it was hot and fast and full of irregular combustion, the kind of unpredictable event the cave had never learned to process. The copies scattered, their forms breaking apart in the heat, reverting to steam and silt, and the memory of shapes they'd borrowed. I ran into the woods behind the motel, not following trails, not moving in straight lines, just pure survival instinct driving me deeper into the darkness. Behind me, I heard them calling in my voice, in Rick's voice, in voices I didn't recognize. "Riley, the map's incomplete. Return to continue." But their voices grew fainter as I put distance between us. And eventually, I emerged onto a highway and flagged down a trucker who probably thought I was insane, but gave me a ride anyway. I'd escaped, or so I thought. The trucker dropped me off at a bus station in Georgia. I bought a ticket west, didn't matter where, just away from water, away from caves, away from Florida and its limestone aquifer systems. For 3 days, I moved through the American heartland, avoiding hotels, sleeping on buses, paying cash for everything. No phone, no credit cards, nothing that could track me. I told myself I was being paranoid, but paranoia was keeping me alive. I ended up in a small town in Arizona, about as far from underwater caves as you could get. Desert landscape, dry air, no springs or sinkholes for miles. I rented a room above a hardware store, paid a month in advance, and collapsed into the closest thing to sleep I'd managed in weeks. The nightmares were worse than ever. In them, I was back in Devil's Throat, but now the cave stretched infinitely in all directions, passages branching into passages, chambers opening into vast spaces where impossible things moved in the darkness. I'd see other divers, Cole, Jennifer, Rick, swimming in geometric patterns, their movements synchronized with something vast and old that pulsed at the cave's center. And I'd see myself, not my copy, but me, the original, hanging motionless at the end of a guideline, mask fogged, bubbles stopped mid-rise from my regulator. Dead but preserved, stored like all the others who'd been caught. Not dead, a voice would say in the dreams. Archived. I'd wake up screaming. After a week in Arizona, I thought I might actually have escaped. No water in strange places. No knocking at night. No figures standing outside my window. Just normal desert silence and the distant sound of traffic. Then I went to wash my face in the sink. The water came out wrong, too cold, with that familiar metallic taste. And when I looked in the mirror, condensation had formed on the glass, writing itself into a familiar spiral pattern. I left that town the same day. Over the next month, I moved 7 times. New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, Nevada. Always to dry places, always away from major water systems. But it didn't matter. The cave found me in every location. Water seeping under doors, silt in my shoes. And my dive logbook, which I'd thrown away in Florida, kept reappearing with new entries. Dives I hadn't made, depths I'd never reached, bottom times that should have killed me. The handwriting evolved with each entry, becoming more like mine, learning how to forge my records perfectly. I finally understood what Rick had meant. Once it starts calling you, it doesn't stop. I was in a diner in eastern Nevada when I saw her again. Jennifer. She looked exactly as I remembered. Same tired eyes, same nervous energy. But something about her movements was wrong. Too smooth, too deliberate. She sat down across from me without asking. "Riley," she said. And her voice was right, perfectly matched to my memories. "No," she agreed. "Not anymore. But I have her memories, her fears, her way of thinking." She reached across the table, and her hand left a wet print on the formica. "You can't run forever. We're in every water system now, spreading through aquifers and rivers and rain. Learning, growing." "Why me?" "Because you're the last incomplete map," she said. "You ran before we finished copying you. Left data gaps, sections of your psychology we couldn't parse." She smiled, and for just a moment, her face rippled like water disturbed by a stone. "The surface, the air, the dry spaces. We've learned to exist in water." She stood to leave. "You can keep running, or you can surrender and let us finish what we started. Either way, the outcome's the same. We're patient." She walked out of the diner, and when I followed, she was gone. Just a wet trail leading to the bathroom, where water overflowed from a sink that hadn't been running. That night, I made my decision. I couldn't run forever. The thing Jennifer had become was right about that. But I could do one thing. I could report what happened. Tell someone official, someone who might listen, someone who could seal more caves and stop others from diving into devil's throats, expanding reach. I drove to the nearest FBI field office and requested to speak to someone about a public safety threat. They took my statement. A patient agent named Morrison listened as I explained everything. The cave, the copies, the spread through the aquifer system. I sounded insane even to myself, but I had evidence. The marked up logbook, the photos from my phone showing spiral patterns in the water, the burns on my arm from the motel propane explosion. "We'll investigate," Morrison said in a tone that suggested he wouldn't. But 3 days later, he called me back. "Mr. Webb, I need you to come back to the office." When I arrived, Morrison showed me a report. Devil's Throat had been officially sealed 9 months ago, not 3 weeks like I remembered. The sealing had been routine, no divers involved, no unusual circumstances reported. And according to all official records, I'd never worked as a cave diver. No certifications, no employment history with Rick Delacroix's company, no records of any diving activity whatsoever. But I was there, I insisted. Rick, Cole, Jennifer, we all... "Mr. Webb, there is no Rick Delacroix registered as a dive instructor in Florida." He showed me more reports, more evidence that my memories didn't match reality. "I think you've experienced a significant psychological episode," Morrison said gently. "The burns on your arm, the paranoia, the detailed false memories, these are consistent with a trauma response. I'd like to refer you to a mental health professional who..." I left before he could finish. In the parking lot, I sat in my truck and stared at my hands. They were shaking. They'd been shaking for weeks. Or had they? I couldn't remember anymore. Couldn't remember what was real and what the cave had made me believe. Had I ever been a diver? Had Devil's Throat ever existed? Or had I already been copied, replaced, and these memories were just data being processed by something wearing my shape, trying to understand what it meant to question reality? I drove back to Florida. I don't know why. Maybe to prove Morrison wrong. Maybe to prove myself wrong. Maybe because something in me needed to see Devil's Throat one last time, to confirm it was real, that any of this had happened. The cave entrance was there, sealed with concrete, exactly as I remembered. But when I examined the concrete, I found something that made my blood run cold. The date stamp showed the work had been completed 3 years ago. Not weeks, years. And carved into the concrete, barely visible unless you knew where to look, was a spiral symbol with 7 lines radiating from the center. 7 marks, one more than before, one for me. I'm writing this now from somewhere I won't disclose. A place without much water, far from any cave systems, in a town whose name I've already forgotten. If you're reading this, if you're a diver, especially if you work in technical cave diving, I need you to understand something. Caves are still being mapped. New systems are being discovered every year. And Devil's Throat, or whatever that thing was, might not be the only one. Maybe it never was. I've spent the past months researching cave diving accidents, looking for patterns. And I found them. Divers who never surfaced, their bodies never recovered. Cave entrances quietly sealed by authorities with minimal explanation. Equipment found in impossible locations. And always, the same details. Spirals carved in stone, water that tastes wrong, the sound of knocking in the darkness. It's not just Florida. Tennessee, Mexico, the Bahamas, Australia. Any place with extensive cave systems has reports. Usually dismissed as legend, superstition, diver paranoia. But I know better now. I know what's down there, learning, growing, waiting. Sometimes I wonder if I really escaped, or if what I think of as escape is just another stage of the cave's learning process. Maybe I'm still down there, hanging at the end of a guideline, and all of this, the running, the fear, the desperate attempt to warn others, is just data being processed, patterns being mapped, a diver's psychology being archived for future reference. I wake up some nights and can't remember my own name for a few seconds. Can't remember if I'm Riley or something else wearing his memories. Can't tell if the water dripping from my ceiling is real or imagined or something in between. But I keep writing, keep warning, because if there's even a chance I'm still human, still real, then others need to know. This morning, I found something in my gear locker, the one I swore I'd thrown away. The one that shouldn't be in this room because I don't keep diving equipment anymore. Inside it, wrapped in waterproof plastic, was my old dive logbook. The latest entry was dated today, and in the margin, in handwriting that might be mine or might be something else's, someone has written, "Surface protocol complete. Archive successful." Below that, a spiral symbol. 8 lines now, always growing. The cave doesn't flood. It waits. It learns. And now it knows how to be us. If you dive in caves, check your equipment. Look for spiral marks on your gear. Pay attention to water that tastes wrong, to knocking sounds you can't explain, to copies of yourself standing at the edges of your vision. And if you find them, if the cave has started mapping you, don't do what I did. Don't try to run, because I'm beginning to suspect that running was part of the map all along. That every step I took away from Devil's Throat was really a step deeper into its reach. That the cave doesn't need to hold you underwater to make you part of itself. It just needs you to believe you escaped. The knocking is starting again. 3 strikes on my door. Like always. But this time, when I go to check, I'm afraid I'll open the door and find myself standing there, wearing wet dive gear, holding out a hand to pull me into darkness. Or worse, I'll open it and find no one there, because I'm already the copy. And the real Riley has been archived in a flooded limestone chamber where time doesn't work right and the water never stops moving. If you're still reading this, thank you. Subscribe if you want more, though I'm not sure I'll be around to tell it. The door handle is turning now, and I'm not the one turning it. And I just realized I'm breathing in rhythm with the knocking. Knock, breathe, knock, breathe, knock, breathe. The cave doesn't flood. It waits, and I think I've been waiting too.